Hi everybody, Lori here for Simon Says Stamp. Thank you so much for joining me today. I have a very springy textural card to share with you. I'm going to be featuring the Springtime Bunnies embossing folder and the coordinating Springtime Bunnies die set. I'll show you how after you die cut the little bunnies, you put them in the embossing folder and create really fun texture on your die cuts. So here is the Springtime Bunnies embossing folder, and I'll show you what the Springtime Bunnies die looks like. Just 4 little bunnies. And I have a bunch of scraps of solid color cardstock. You could use whatever you want. Maybe you want to die cut them out of white and add ink blending. You could use pattern paper. I love to use solid color cardstock and bring in all the spring goodness. Okay, so I'm going to you can only do 4 at a time because there's only 4 dies, and you only need little slivers. This is a great way to chip away at all those scraps, which is what I love to do. Okay, so you got your 4 little bunnies. Some are like leaping, some are sitting. They're just like cute little silhouettes. And as far as cardstock, I have a mixture here of Simon Says Stamp and Concord 9th. I'm just honestly not even sure what I'm using. They're just scraps out of my scrap drawer. And yeah, that's what I'm doing. I just tried to pull out colors that looked springy, like Easter eggs. And I'm taking them off camera, running them through my Anna Griffin Impress, and cutting away. I think I do about 3 rounds, and that should give you 12 bunnies. So we'll end up with 12 bunnies, all with solid color cardstock, and then we're going to put those into the embossing folder and add the fun texture. Now for the background, I have a panel of buttermilk cardstock trimmed down smaller than an A2 card, and I'm using the Wavy Ways embossing folder to emboss this wavy texture on my background. Now here's how I do the Simon Says Stamp embossing folders on my Anna Griffin Impress. I learned this from Jennifer McGuire, and it works like a charm. Just the embossing folder and 1 plate works beautiful. I never know with all the different companies' thicknesses of embossing folders, but that one works well. Now for the bunnies, there's 2 different sides with the embossing folder on the inside. One is raised and one is kind of recessed. I find it's easiest for me to use the recessed side. You flip them over and you kind of they fit right into the groove. You can kind of feel when they pop right into the sweet spot, and you kind of lock them in place so they're perfectly aligned in that embossing folder. Now there's a lot of bunnies on the embossing folder, but some of them are reversed, and I don't want to emboss the reverse side of my die cut. I only want to show the pretty side, so you can only really emboss 4 at a time. Now for this one, I'm using a plate, the embossing folder, and then I decided to pull out a metal shim because I just wanted to make sure I got good texture on those bunnies. I'm not sure that I really needed to use that metal shim, but there's like a little bunny tail, and I wanted to make sure I got that. For these little die cuts, I wasn't sure. So whenever you're not sure, you can always pull out a metal shim to give you that extra pressure. And so there you have cute little embossed bunnies. Now originally I tried this to do all the bunnies in the Springtime Bunny embossing folder, but like I said, some of the images, some of the bunnies are reversed. So if you don't mind having your, the scratchy side of a die cut, sometimes that's going to show, but it bothered me, so I had to create my own. So that's why I'm using the Wavy Ways background and not the Springtime Bunnies embossing folder for the background. You could do that if you want to just use the Springtime Bunnies embossing folder and emboss your background and then pop on all the bunnies. You can, but some of the bunnies are reversed, so you're going to have to emboss like the back side of your die cut. And for me, I'm just really picky about that scratchy look. I don't know, unless you have brand new plates or a brand new magnet, it's really hard to get the back side of your die cuts to look as smooth as the front side. Does that make sense? Anyway, I'm very picky about that. So now I have the Wavy Ways background. I have all my bunnies here, and I'm just kind of getting the lay of the land with my place and, what is this, place and score wand. by Simon Says Stamp. By the way, everything that I'm using will be listed in the description box if you're watching on YouTube. So once I have these bunnies, how I like them to be, spaced and color, I took out a piece of press and seal, and I'm going to carefully lay that over. Try not to move them, which I did move them a little bit. So I'm going to shimmy them carefully just to make sure that they're straight. And then I'll press this down, and that way I can flip them over and add an adhesive of choice. For me, I'm going to use foam squares, but you could also just use glue or tape runner. You could use different thicknesses of foam if you want to make it really thin or really thick, whatever you prefer at this point. So carefully removing the background. Now you have your bunnies all in place. And I'm going to use these 3D foam squares. These are by Simon Says Stamp. I have a ton of them. I believe they come in 2 different thicknesses, and this is the thicker of I would prefer the thinner, but I grabbed these out of my drawer. These are the black ones and the thicker. So you're going to get some dimension. Anywho, removing the backing off of all these foam squares. Try not to move anything, but that press and seal holds it down pretty good. Now I'm going to carefully line this up over top of my embossed buttercream. Is it buttercream or buttermilk? I never remember the names. Popping this up, carefully remove that press and seal, and now you have all your bunnies perfectly lined up. And then I'll flip this over and trim off everything that's hanging off the edges. I'm going to use scissors. You could also use a guillotine trimmer. Sometimes I worry about my steady hand getting a nice straight cut when I use scissors. But I do find scissors are better if you have some foam tape sticking out. You ever get your foam tape stuck in the guillotine trimmer? Like it just doesn't cut the foam tape very well. Anywho, I added one little, I had the leftover from being cut off, that little yellow bunny, and I added the face to the right side of the card. It just filled up that teeny gap. Then I added some of this big Mama foam tape roll. It's nice and thin, and I'm popping this up on an A2 white card base. Now for a sentiment, I'm using the Bunny Blessings stamp set. I'm going to emboss this Easter Blessings in white on a little scrap of black cardstock. So first I'm going to prep it with the Simon Says Stamp powder tool, which I highly recommend. And I noticed in the recent Favorite Things release, they had an embossing bundle, which gives you all the basics for embossing. A powder tool, a watermark ink, 3 embossing powders, gold, white, and clear, microfiber cloth, and the little hot hands tweezers, which are nice for holding something when you're embossing it. I usually use my Simon Says Stamp tweezers. See, I'm using those here, but I also have the hot hands. They're really cute, and they work well for holding things while you're embossing. Using the coordinating die to cut out the sentiment, and then I'm going to put a little foam tape on the back of it and pop it right into the center. So the sentiment kind of rests half on a bunny nose and then half on the textured background. So I put a little glue on the bunny nose and then a foam square over on the left side. So it's like teeter-tottering, but it's secure. And then for embellishment, I'm using some of these new, they're called Pastel Ice Embellishment Mix. They're very shimmery, but they're slightly pastel colors. And there you have it, a very textural bunny Easter card. Fun way to add texture to your die cuts as well as your background. I hope you enjoyed this video. Thank you so much for joining me. Have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time.
Hi there, I'm Heidi, Simon's mama and founder at simonsaysstamp.com. Thank you so much for watching our video. If you like what you just saw, be sure to press the thumbs up and subscribe to see more great content.